Am I the asshole for buying my fifth property instead of helping my siblings? I-44M was a child I was incredibly into owning property and designing houses. I work as an architect and am doing quite well for myself. Bought my first duplex here in Germany a long time ago, where I rent out both part. Then I own 2 houses in Italy and 1 in Spain. 2 of them are get rented out as holiday homes, while the last one I use for vacations and rent out a room to a friend of mine. So I have a lot of passive income at the moment, but only after a lot of time and money investments and refurbishing of these houses. I rent in NYC at the moment as my job has made me move here temporarily. My brother, 48M, does an apartment. He has a family with 2 kids, while my wife and I are childless. They are currently looking to purchase a house that fits all of them nicely. While they have found their dream house, it's out of budget for them. Meanwhile, my wife and I are about to buy our 5th house, this time in France. It's going to be one of our largest purchases yet, significantly larger than anything else we have done. It's a great deal on the property, however, and ideally what my wife and I want to retire in. When having a family FaceTime with my siblings and parents, I brought it up. Initially very happy for me, my brother mentioned how he needs a larger home for his family, and how I should give up on this opportunity to give him money for his house, and spend the rest on refurbishing their new home. I just laughed and said flat out no. Edit. Thought this was a joke. This was apparently the wrong move. My entire family turns against me and starts berating me. After 10 minutes of them taking turns telling me to buy my brother a house, I said I'd think about it and left. I am a bit of a pushover, so after talking to my wife, we agreed we could wait and buy their house and rent it out to them at no profit. Apparently, this was insulting to him, having his younger brother be his landlord, and my parents said I should just outright give him the money we have been saving. I told him to piss off and started moving forward with the paperwork on our house in France. After talking to my friends, they said I should put family first, and it's not like we are struggling for money. Update 1. When the pandemic in NY got worse and worse, I ended up back in Spain. After having a conversation with my friend and this post, I decided I had made the right choice. We are moving forward with the house in France currently. Furthermore, we are deciding to sell the 2 Italian homes. We realized we haven't been there ourselves in a long time, and it was only being rented out. This decision was twofold. Couldn't get some of the remarks from last post out of my head, and we wanted some liquidity given the economy. We also decided to only list with local real estate companies. On to my brother, who turned out not to be telling us the whole truth. A week after the post, his wife calls me asking to reconsider. Turns out there was a reason, but my brother didn't want to tell me. So I told her, either he tells me himself, or I won't even consider anything. A week later, he ends up calling and tells me everything. It turns out he had developed a bit of a gambling problem the last 2 years and has taken a noticeable percent out of their savings gambling. Less than 40%, but more than 15% according to him. The dream house was now a lot further out of reach than it was meant to be. Apparently, he has been going to therapy for it for months, but the financial damage it did set them back far. My parents knew since the start, and I knew my brother was having Marshall problems a couple years ago. But I never asked why, as he and his wife were very secretive about details. Turns out this was the problem. Apparently my parents had told him to ask me but ask too much from me. So when he rebutted with smaller ask, I would be more inclined to accept. Had an incredibly harsh conversation with my parents. They feel like I owe the family, and it's more their money than mine since they raised me. That's a whole different problem. After a pretty difficult conversation with him, I offered the rent at cost, and once he has built up his savings, we will sell him the house minus any rent he has paid over the time it takes. Some people mentioned this, rent to own. He happily accepted, and now it's today. Hopefully we can have a reunion after the pandemic is over and laugh about this. Update 2. I think the last 2 years have been overall shit. Pandemic-related issues, but also due to my brother's actions. We ended up selling our business to a different firm in Germany. Pandemic made it difficult for us to set up our sourcing, and after not working on any projects for a couple months, we decided to pull the plug when we got an offer. Not really doing anything since that, but we sold it at a profit, so going to explore our options for a while. Before we sold it, my brother and his wife ended up divorcing, as did my mother and my father. I mentioned prior that my father had a gambling addiction when we were younger, and that my parents' reaction to the whole mess confused me at the time. It turns out that my mother had forced my father to give his entire paycheck and some. So, he had turned to gambling by her suggestion. She is a very holier-than-thou type of person, so to hear she suggested gambling was insane to me. But it turns out she is inherently very financially abusive. They almost divorced in the past, but she stopped pestering my father as much. He thought she had become better. But it turns out that good things never last, and when my brother started working, she started demanding similar things, and apparently later using me as reference that I too had been sending her money, and my success was driven by the motivation to provide to myself and her. I moved abroad quite early, so my one connection with my brother was limited. She later pushed him onto gambling, and he fell head first. After the house situation, he had stopped for a couple of months, but relapsed pretty quickly with local gambling machines, then switched to buying prepaid cards to gamble online again. My father claims to have had no idea it was occurring, but he was plenty happy with vacations paid by a stay-at-home wife, his pressure on me to buy him a house. He filed for divorce, but I blame him equally at this point. My brother's wife filed for divorce shortly after it all came to light. Only once he filed did he tell her about our mom was doing. I reached out to him to provide support, but he told me to fuck off and never speak to him again. He lives with his girlfriend now, and still gambles according to his wife. His wife is still in the house. We have stopped payments. She already worked part-time, but I don't want to cut into her expenses. I guess the only good thing is cheap interest rates on that mortgage. I've cut contact with both my father and mother, and I guess got contact cut by my brother. I feel like my father divorced my mom in hopes I would take him in. We have since moved into our house here in France. I am still not a fan of French people, but I guess I called this upon myself. My wife is thriving here, and with the retired, unemployed life, I have mostly been on Reddit or in my workshop. I think a combination of boredom, the pandemic, and my lost faith in my family have disenfranchised me a bit. Since we sold the company, but after the family news, I was always hoping for some good twist or good news here at the end. How everything that happened to me was one of life's many trials. But I realize now that often you are just a side character in other people's trials, and your success has more to do with right time, right place.